Now, the latest in the financial sector stability reports now being released by the Central Bank of Nigeria is coming through today as we speak. And the Deputy Director in charge of financial policy regulation at the Central Bank, Dr. Hassan Mahmood, is live here in the studio with us to talk us through this latest report. Good morning, Doctor. We appreciate your time.
Good morning, boss.
Thank you. Now, in the main, what will this report reveal about the state of Nigeria's financial system?
Indeed, a lot. A lot is coming out of the report. The Financial Stability Report appraises development in the international economic environment, both the international financial system and the global output serene, as well as the domestic economy. Yep, we're all aware the challenges of the global economy. Output growth is picking up, but slowly. We've seen negative interest rates in some Euro economies, even in Japan. We've seen uncertainties in the UK Brexit, in the US political change, and the current pickup you see in the interest rate in the US. All these have implications for the domestic economy. At the domestic scene, we have the monster here. The inflation rate pressure is at its peak at the end of 2016, even though it's tickling down in this first quarter now, the numbers we are seeing for January, February. However, you still see the distortions in the forex market, the depreciation that is going on, though this current CBN policies are remedifying that now. We've seen developments also in the interest rate sector, and then the real impact of the lower oil prices, both on the government, on the financial system, and then the recession. We're all coming out of that. There are better pictures now that we're seeing. However, these factors have implications for the performance of the financial system. Within this context, global and domestic, that is where the financial system performed. We appraise the financial system using certain indicators. And these indicators, financial soundness indicators, tells you how resilient or how stable are the financial system, how sound are them to continue their financial intermediation activities. For the asset quality, we know it's a common knowledge now that there's a huge pickup in NPLs, non-performing loans. We had a trend of 5.3% end of 2015, first half of 2016 ticked to 11.7%. We're looking at 14% at the end of 2016, the second half of 2016. That is a big issue in the banking industry. However, if you look at that bucket of asset quality, the rise in NPL is a deterioration in asset quality. But even in that bucket of asset quality, if you look at the ratio of liquid asset core to the gross asset of the bank, you see a positive movement there. Ratio of liquid asset to short-term liabilities. It's also that for the risk of insolvency or risk of liquidity crunch in the bank is mitigated by that development, even though the NPL it's rising. If you
so when the numbers come out, and I'm sorry to interject there, trying to explain this to the folks on the street, when you say, oh, the level of non-performing loans in the banking sector is rising far beyond the threshold that the central bank finds permissible, as it were, and you say these are credits to petrol imports, oil and gas, upstream activities for those who are buying oil assets, M&As, what have you. Then you have the power sector. You try to dissect this to say, look, there's no problem as far as systemic liquidity in the banking system is concerned.
You've done substantial part of the analysis for me.
Oh, really?
Yes. In fact, what the breakdown of that NPL substantially comes from the oil and gas sector. The exposure to the oil and gas sector combined with the manufacturing sector is about 40%, the total loan portfolio to that sector. We know the story in the oil sector, the oil price crunch, and how that has affected facilities that are open in that sector. The recession on the manufacturing sector, how output growth has declined, is even in negative. We are going to the positive side of it, but those factors are counter-signal for that NPL. However, the good news is the proportion, there's a stress test we did about this. I'm going to talk about the capital and the earning side of the financial soundness indicators. But if you look at the exposure to this sector, about 80%, the categorization of banks we have the large, medium, and small banks. The largest proportion of this loan, about 80-something% of it, goes to the large banks. These large banks are still maintaining a capital adequacy ratio, even with these trends, at a comfortable level of about 14%, of which the threshold is actually 14%, but the Basel numbers are supposed to be like 10%. So they have a big margin there. So the shock is actually not systemic. The small banks, which are a bit fragile, having lower capital adequacy ratio at the baseline scenario, are the ones that we are really concerned if these exposures are to those sectors, because that will really drain on their capital requirement and which will affect their going concern. The other issues I wanted to add was that if you look at the capital quality bucket, the capital adequacy ratio for the industry is still within, it dipped slightly to about 14% or 13.9%. From the 14 threshold we have for the large bank. For the small bank, we actually needed 10%. And for the Basel requirement, it's also like 10%. But if you look at the numbers of like the tier 1 capital to risk-weighted asset, you see a pickup in that. If you look at, you know, the NPL, net provision to capital, that has dipped just because of the NPL Jacob. But the earning side of the story, the earning indicators, expenses indicators, we will see a dip in interest margin to gross income, showing that, you know, earnings made from credits is reducing significantly. And then you also see expenses, non-interest expenses, coming more from personnel side of it, meaning cost of doing business is getting higher, which is draining on the. So the return on asset is in the range of 1%, while return on equity is just within 2%, which is globally still satisfactory if you look at this terrain we're working on.
Putting this financial sector stability report together means that you must have stress test the banking system.
Thank you.
You did that last year, did you?
Yep.
So
I did that same.
Now, is any bank in Nigeria going to fail anytime soon?
Yeah, the stress test side of it, you know, from the analysis I've made, the critical risk factors emerging is the concentration risk, sectoral, this manufacturing and the oil sector. If we did a stress test using that scenario and assume that the NPL deteriorates by 100%, we're talking of 14%, if it deteriorates to 28%, that's 100% in default. We'll find that in the industry, the car will still be within 13%, yeah, falling in the car. That is post-shock analysis now. For the large bank, they are actually still in 14%. For the small bank, some of them go below 12%, but still within the range of 10%. So even if you look at that adverse condition on the stress test scenario, the banks are still comfortable. So in terms of resilience and systemicness, the banks are fine. The contagion effect of this is minimal, so it is something that is not systemic.
So what would you do with the latest IMF Article 4 report that says there's a need to look at the stability of the banking system?
Yeah, the IMF report is actually more complementary if you look at the tail end of it on the development in the financial sector. Yeah, there was a need for recapitalization for some banks, which is output of this NPL asset deterioration. Definitely there is supposed to be capital provision to meet that. But if you look at the IMF report, you will see developments in the external sector are actually favorable. Driving force of this is the exchange rate. When the inflows to the external reserves picks up, because now we are seeing, even though our balance of payment position is positive, terms of trade is negative. However, with the things that are going on now, the CBN activities, the recovery in the economy, you see uptick in activities in the manufacturing sector, and even the global economy that is picking up. The Niger Delta thing that is sterilizing, getting to normal. So you will be seeing a shift in the trends of the trajectory of global trade. For Nigeria, you will be seeing positive terms of trade from the IMF statistics that is just released. And we're also seeing significant growth in export in 2017 and 2018, while import is declined significantly. That is the essence of central bank intervention in the effect. So if export is picking up, these returns that are coming into the economy, both at the domestic and the external sector, exchange rate depreciation is stalled, while prices will start, going down as supply increases from the domestic sector.
Very interesting. But again, these are very difficult times for central bankers, and not just Nigeria, all over the world, even the US, the world's largest economy. It's a lot of putting on new thinking caps. So the question is, what will be the new thinking in central banking for the Central Bank of Nigeria, considering both what you call the domestic and external headwinds that keeps coming almost on a daily basis? Some of these are geopolitical issues. New elections in France. You have the problems in Russia. You're looking at the United States with a new administration, looking at economic nationalism. How would you put all of this together when we'll be looking at the next sector stability report?
Yeah, it is important. That's why I said the financial stability report appraises global development. All these factors you have mentioned are issues that in a macroprudential analysis are important in appraising an economic environment, a financial system. We've seen issues even in domestic economy of market failure, which is what we are seeing in the forex market. However, the interventions that are coming in are supposed to, propel the price discovery function of the market such that demand and supply will bring an efficient equilibrium of knowing the exact price that these commodities go for. The interventions are temporary, and they are just to bring the economy or the financial system to the stability where financial fundamentals or economic fundamentals, demand and supply, will trace. For the Central Bank of Nigeria, the risk-based supervision approach we're using for banking supervision is actually proactive, and it's an appraisal of what are the emerging risks coming to the system and how are those risks going to be mitigated. The commercial banks or the financial institutions are supposed to have their internal mechanism of risk management, while the regulatory authorities also have an appraisal process of looking at how these emerging risks could be contagious or systemic to the system. So that approach is still being intensified and strengthened by the central bank to avoid any vulnerability or excessive exposure to the sector to these both external and domestic macroeconomic factors.
But is the FX market, making the central bank chiefs going back to the drawing board as far as your supervision, as far as monetary policy and all the other parameters are concerned? Is the FX market giving you folks sleepless nights? What new thinking are you bringing to the table to tackle this very important problem?
You see, fundamentally, Bosun, every economic or policy decision is based on certain assumptions. It's based on certain rational expectations of humans and market behavior. Fundamentally, the issues we have in the forex market is actually that of operators' behavior. Substantially, we have robust, policy framework, like the guideline of June 2016 that came out. But however, the implementation is forestalled by these issues, distortions that you have in the system, by manipulators, by arbitrage speculators in the market, which distort the transition that is being projected in that policy framework. So even though, in economics you can model, economic environment, the most difficult thing to model is human behavior. And when you see, and that's the frustration of the governor of central bank, when operators, and that's why we don't even buy the idea of say, okay, leave your market open to market forces to determine this. The distortions in the market are just not, following the economic fundamentals. The demands are not mimicking what the economic activities is projecting. If you look at the example of the depreciation in the FX market, let's say open the market, devalue, depreciate so that inflows can come in, external inflows can come in. But we had a situation where we had over 550 in the parallel market. Why didn't the inflows come in? They can have a kill in that section of the market. Why didn't the inflows come in? So indeed, the bank just will not sit back and look at these distortions or these not invisible and the visible hands destroy a mechanism that is supposed to follow, a global standard trajectory.
I got it. It's a very interesting thing. You just keep the window open, but just hang it somehow so that the winds don't blow everything in the house off. That's the way it's going.
Thank you very
much for coming. We appreciate that. Dr. Hassan Mahmood, who is the Deputy Director in charge of Financial Policy Regulation at the Central Bank of Nigeria, as the report comes out today. We'll be taking a break. We'll be right back.